Hello, this is Keith with How to Build Your Own Home. I'm going to go live here in just a second. And I got a couple of questions that came in earlier today. And so I'm going to be going over those questions for a couple of people that said, I can't be there at live. I'm going to put my hat on. I feel like I'm going to go to work. Sometimes I can't go to work unless I put my hat on. So a couple of questions that came in. And because they couldn't be here, and I wanted to cover some of those questions here that came on my phone through earlier today. One of them was, in fact, let me answer this question real quickly here. Hey, Paul, you are live on YouTube right now. What can I do for you? Okay. Okay. That's fine. I'll take you whenever you can take me. That's fine. I'll tell my drywaller. He'll be there all the week next week. I'll plan on it then. Okay, thanks, Paul. Bye. I had to take that call. I have an HVAC contractor, and he's got to move a vent for a hood in a kitchen. And if I don't have that hood moved, we can't really move forward with cabinets and stuff like that. So I'm glad I caught him when I did. He's actually going in San Diego right now, but he'll be back up this week. Anyway, long story short, a couple of questions. One really good question that came through was, we love you in Canada. We have a question, slab on grade, and is it really the best thing for Canada? And I'm going to give you some pros and cons with slab on grade. I do a lot of slab on grade, quite a bit. It's really a popular approach in the desert area, and I'm going to tell you why. But it may not be the best approach for colder climates. Let me give you this here box. Kind of looks like a pizza box here. And this, imagine this is your slab on grade, okay? And you typically have anywhere from 4 to 6 inches of exposure to the outside cold temperatures in colder climates because you can't have the dirt come too close to it. By most permitting offices, they will want to make sure that there's clearance between the slab and the frame structure, and that there's at least 3 to 4, maybe even 6 inches of clearance. Now, there's problems with that in really, really, really cold climates. If you can get down to below freezing and it stays below freezing, the outside temperature is going to wick up against that slab and work its way right into the slab of the home. And you can literally go down on the floor right near the exterior wall of that home, and you can feel that cold temperature coming right into the home. Now, there's a couple of ways to ameliorate that. You can put some ISO foam, rigid foam on the outside of that slab, but you can't really get all the way up past the dirt. Otherwise, that foam is going to be exposed and you're going to see it. Or you put the foam insert inside the footing before they pour the monolithic slab. And this is going to be really complicated to explain, but let me explain it this way. Let's say that the footing goes down this deep, 36 inches, could be 40 inches. You've got a frost depth no matter which way you look at it. That footing has to go all the way down to cover frost from coming into the home and heaving up and down. And so the slab is going to be here on top of that footing, right? Right here is where your cold part is. You can take some foam and put it on the inside of the footing like that, and it will be just below the slab. And you can cut that foam at an angle so that you don't have, like I did some homes up north where they put the foam right up against the footing and it showed, meaning when you had the slab and you're going to put carpet and linoleum or tile, you're literally putting tile and carpet right over an inch of foam on the top of that. Well, if they cut it at an angle and shave that last half inch, then you only have about a quarter, half inch of concrete surfacing over the whole part, but the rest of that is insulated. You can do a slab on grade, but you've got to think about insulating that slab. You don't want cold wicking from the outside in through that concrete and into the floor, because that's going to make heating that home terrible. And I've mentioned this a couple of times. If you're in a very, very cold climate, you want heat to come from the bottom up to the top of the house inside the room. This is a 10-foot ceiling in here. And if I'm going to have 9 months of the year that my energy bill is going to be to heat that room, I'm going to want the heat to come from the bottom and then circulate up at the top and then recirculate that way. Now, I build in both climates. I build in a desert climate where it's just the opposite. I want to take the heat from outside the high area here, and I want to recirculate that. I want cold to come to the bottom, and just the opposite, which means my vents, I want my vents in the ceiling. But if I'm in a cold environment, I want my vents in the floor. So that makes for another pros and cons. With slab on grade, if you don't put those heat vents in the floor, you're not going to have that movement of heat from the bottom up. It's typically what you want. And so I prefer stem wall in cold climates. A stem wall allows for that opportunity to have all your venting easily underneath the floor trusses, and you can move them. Plumbers make it nice. Electricians like it. All your drains are easily accessible. And a lot of people in cold climates are not familiar with putting your piping, your conduits, water, power, everything underneath the slab. In fact, they get kind of scared about it. If they don't put typical PEX and sleeve, which is your PEX piping inside a sleeve, then that might get them on. And I know a lot of builders, especially in the northern areas, that they're not used to that. So I would really push for a stem wall. You're going to have a 36 plus inch frost depth anyway, that stem wall, and it's going to go down into the ground substantially because that's your frost protection. So given the fact that you're going to have that anyway, I would just do a stem wall and then go ahead and put in some floorboards, some floor trusses on top of that, or what's called top cord bare. You can actually put them inside and hang them on that stem wall. Now, the only caveat with the stem wall is now you're lifting the house a little bit and you're going to have steps come into the home. Where I build, most of it's slab on grade, we can literally have a zero threshold into the home, which is why a lot of people build in the desert. It's all slab on grade, and you can have a zero threshold policy across the board into your showers, into your house, into your garage. Makes it really, really, really nice. I don't know if you've ever had a chance, but if you ever want to go to a home show, come to a home show in the southwest corner of Utah called SUBA. It's called the Southern Utah Home Builders Association. It's probably the best home show in the nation, bar none. And I've looked at a lot of them, and a lot of people report it's one of the best home shows. We have some incredible craftsmen where I live. And it's been that way because we've had like a 25-year constant sustainable growth spurt, because it's one of the top five places to retire to in the United States. As a result, we've had some craftsmen and really good quality, and we've mastered slab on grade, I think better than just about any place in the nation. So that's what we're typically used to. Being in a colder climate, you got to insulate. You got to think about getting that heat from the floor up that way. And I would strongly recommend a stem wall. All right, so I wanted to answer that question in the best way I can. Every zone, every build zone has its own thermometer, has its own technology, has its own requirements, has its own issues. And learning how people build in your particular area is really, really important. So I wanted to answer that question. So I'm already getting a lot of questions here. Let's go ahead and answer some of those. And if I can, I'll get to some others that have come to me earlier today. This is a WD, says, Keith, you've mentioned in past videos that you recommend owner builders form an LLC. Would you mind summarizing why you think this is something we should do? I recommend it if you think that you could actually build what I would call a cottage industry or a side hustle. If you can create a side hustle from you being an owner builder, meaning you can maybe mentor other people, or that you learn how to clean. I know an owner builder that just learned to clean job sites and created a whole LLC on cleaning job sites, and they moved from there maybe into something else, even handyman work. If you think that you could create a little side hustle for it, by all means, create an LLC. You're able to write off a lot of the losses through the LLC, expenses through the LLC. It's really powerful to start a business with an LLC. Now, check with your attorney, check with your financial advisor. I'm none of those. I can just tell you what I've done in the past and what a lot of other owner builders have done in the past. Every state is different, but having an LLC is powerful. I have a brother, and he has not created an LLC until just lately, and he could have written off a portion of his house against his taxes because he works from home. That's what an LLC does. It allows you to flow expenses through the LLC against your income. But again, check with your attorney, check with your financial advisor. I'm none of those, but an LLC is powerful for that, especially if you think you want to create a business and keep that business for a long time. So as an owner builder, you are going into business and you're going to learn things and come out on the other side better informed, better understanding, and it's probably the best experience you'll get with knowing how to operate a business. So there's a lot of pluses to it. Hope that answers your question. I'm very curious to above. Yes, I hope that answers both of the questions there for an LLC. But an LLC is typically better than an S corp as you get to be more robust as a business. You move that business from an LLC to an S corp because now there's better advantages as an S corp. Again, talk with an attorney, talk with a financial advisor. I went through that whole process. Was an LLC for a long time, then I transitioned to an S corp. So a lot of different advantages based upon the income level that your company makes and eventually transitions to. David B asks, isn't it cheaper to build a basement than to add extra roofing over slab on grade of the same combined square footage? That is a good question. I've had that question a lot. It really depends. What's your geology like? If you're going to be hammering out rock, well, of course you don't want to do that. That gets to be very costly. Also find out about what your concrete costs in your particular area. If you've got a concrete Portland cement mixing batch and it's far away, there could be a rural area and your concrete may be at a great distance, and that's going to be costly. Are you going to have to pump the concrete, or can they just drive up and pour and dump the concrete from the truck into the form? If they have to pump it, that's another factor that you've got to consider. The other thing to consider is in cold climates, very, very, very cold climates, or extreme climates, that basement becomes a moderating temperature quality. And if you have a frost depth, I had a home like this that I built some time ago, and the frost depth was 38 inches. And that's, almost 3 feet. And just for another few feet, we have basically a basement. So if you have that and you have the frost depth, and I have frost depths that are closer to 40 plus inches. Once you get to that level, and you have to you're going to do a second story anyway, just go down anyway. You now got all that insulation, that constant temperature. And a basement can be colder. It's harder to heat, but it's really nice in the summertime. So there's a lot of pros and cons with regard to that. I build in a very, very mild temperate area, and some of my soils are nasty. Some of them are not that bad. And I make a decision based upon my geology. That's the one thing that tells me if I should actually go into a basement. I did another home about 5 years ago, and we were going to go with a full basement. And as we started to do test pits, I was worried about that. So I told my client, I tell you what, we're going to run into some hard pan rock, and this is exactly where the home's going to be. We ended up cutting the basement in half because I didn't want to hammer that, and some of it was going to call for a hammerhead on a traco. Very expensive, hauling it out, real big mess, huge cost. So we ended up shaving the basement to avoid that hard pan that we were running into. So you see what I'm talking about when it comes to a basement. There's a lot of variables that can hit you upside the head, and you don't see that. So you have to look at it very, very carefully. So I could talk forever on basements and things I've been through in my life. A couple of questions here. Thanks for answering the slab on gray. Let's see, Brandon. Let's see. I get behind really quick. Let's see. Isn't it cheaper to build a basement than to add extra roofing? Yep, I answered that question. Brandon Brockway. Welcome, Brandon. Question: have you ever started tile install while the drywallers are hanging rock? Yes, but I wouldn't recommend that. Okay. Here's one of the problems you run into by starting to tile too soon. There's a lot of sanding that goes on, and that particulate, it's called a silica, that gets embedded into your base pan, and it can affect the bonding of the tile to the cement. It can affect everything. You need to get the drywalling done, and plus they have a den shield or a particular drywall that's a mold impermeable drywall for those showers. That's got to get hung there first before you can even start your shower anyway. And on top of that, the painters, when they paint, they can overspray and cause a mess that they typically like to paper over to protect that tile. So I typically like to get drywall done, all the tape and texture done, have the painter come in, get their stuff done, and then I have the tile person come in. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Painter is a mess. They dominate the entire environment. Drywallers are a mess. They dominate the entire environment. And I like to have the drywallers come in, be done, get them out. Painters come in, be done, get them out. And then your finished carpenters and your tile people, they can work around each other pretty nicely. But I don't like to have one sub that dominates the entire environment, the atmosphere and everything in there with another person who needs, to get in that way. So logistically, it can be a nightmare. However, if you've got like a 7,000 square foot home, that's a different story. I've built homes that are 6, 7, 8,000 square feet, and they're so big. I tell my drywallers, get this section done. As soon as you're done, I'm going to have other guys come in so they can work in this section of the home while you're working in that section of the home. So if you're dealing with a large home, now you're going to want to try to get them on top of each other just a little bit. However, when it comes to paint, they dominate. Nobody else should be in there while the painter's in there. You're breathing the fumes. It's not fun. It's not something I'd recommend. But possibly drywallers could be overlapping with some tile people if you want. A lot of variables to think about when it deals with scheduling and its logistics and thinking, okay, can I have someone working here while someone's working here? And if I can't without them getting in each other's face, then fine. Especially dealing with cold climates. And we're going into a glacial cycle where we're actually increasing our winters, and they're going to be longer and colder. And you're going to be fighting that cold. It's going to be bad. And just follow, there's a gentleman I follow called Space Weather News, and he's been reporting, Adapt 2030 is another channel. They've been reporting on the changing climate that we're going in through, which is not anything that the powers to be are telling you. These are cycles that the Earth goes through naturally. And so we're going into a cold cycle. In fact, we're going into a glacial age where we're actually going into a small mini ice age. And believe it or not, that's where we're headed. And that's going to affect how we build in colder climates far more than you can even imagine. Some of the frost steps are going to change, and you're going to see a lot of things change in that. So be very cautious about, if you're in a cold climate, it's going to be even colder. So think like that. Let's see, Ryan. Welcome, Ryan. Question. Thanks for answering my slab on grade question. One more for you. Looking into radiant heating within the slab, or maybe something like warm board, would that help with the freezing issue? Yes, it would. Now, there's two different types. There's the electric, and of course, there's the forced a water heated, or what could be an oil heated, so you don't want it to freeze. In cold climates, if you're pushing water through that board and it freezes, that whole thing gets destroyed inside there. One of my first experiences with construction was helping my dad. He owned the first and oldest bed and breakfast in the state where I build, and he had copper tubing, and it was a boiler. And that copper tubing went to the outer part of the wall to heat radiant floorboard heaters. And that thing just froze and split and broke. It was all the time. And the only way to stop that from breaking is to constantly have the temperature up. So if he was never there for days or weeks on end and the place was pretty much shut down, he had to keep that thing heated anyway. So I know that there's a lot of new technologies, like they put antifreeze or some type of antifreeze in the boiler system so it doesn't freeze anymore. There's a lot of new technologies to help for that. Um, uh, but just double check on all that. If you can get that heat to come up from the basement or the bottom of the floor up, again, that's going to be a big plus. Weigh your costs, pros and cons on that. Forced air is going to be more cheaper than some sort of a heating system in your floor, and I've checked a lot of those. I just had a bid come in for a home up on the mountain. I saw the bid, and I think the main floor was around 2,200 square feet, and it was almost $100,000 for a warm board system. And that's very costly, very comfortable, but very costly. So weigh your costs on that and ask yourself what you really want to, where you really want to spend your money. So David question says, click the thumbs up if you like this stream. Great. Yes, please. I appreciate that. I think I'm the only builder out there that's doing live stream. I think there are one or two others, but I think it helps. I cover so much ground with the live streams. It's amazing. I get questions all the time on YouTube, probably about 20 or 30 of them a day. And I can cover more ground this way than sitting in my office answering those questions. So that's why I do the live stream. And plus, it introduces people to the process of owner building in a better way. Question, how can I navigate the AHJ San Diego County? I'm building an off-grid solar array to power the build RV on property during the build with the ultimate goal to be off-grid after CO. Really good question. So I'm curious, are you needing power during the build? And if that's the case, then they're going to inspect everything based upon the power consumption or the power you need during the build. After it's all done, if you're looking to pull the meter from the house and be completely off grid, then that's between you and the power company. But if that power company is the city, then I'm not sure how they would react to literally pulling the meter off the home, because that's the real trick, is if you can, that's when you're really off grid, because they're going to charge you a fee for just having that meter connected to that home, regardless, all the taxes, fees, etc. You want to find out if you can actually get the home built, have temp power there so you have the power to build everything, and then ask the power company, if it is the city or PG&E, I think it's Pacific Gas and Electric with the state of California, can you then literally pull the meter off the home? And if you can, that's truly off grid. So I hope that answers your question for you. All right. That's the best way to navigate, is just pretend like you're going to have power up through CO, and after CO, find out the politics or the possibility of pulling the meter off the home after the fact, if you truly can have sufficient power to go off grid that much. So question here, Chance, welcome Chance. Hello Chance. Renstrom, just jumping in, so not sure if this is what you were discussing. Can you discuss slab on grade differences between footers stem wall slab versus footers slab with stem? Yeah, there's a couple of ways to deal with that. I'm not a fan of a monolithic slab. A monolithic slab is where you've got a footing here and they pour the slab all at once. All right. I like to pour the footing first, then build my forms for my slab, and then pour my slab. I really love that style. It's cleaner, and your forms are not going to bulge and bust. I've had a lot of forms over the years that blow because of the pressure against that form with all that concrete for the stem wall and the slab in there. You've got to build your forms and know what you're doing. I've had forms blow where I've lost 2 to 3 yards of concrete, and that's a couple $100 right there, lost. So if it's a two-step situation with the slab on grade, great. And I prefer that. With just a stem wall, it's the same thing. I would have the footings poured first, then they come and put their 2 or 3 foot stem wall forms on top of that after it, and then they pour that in a second pour. It's a 2 pour job, and a lot of subcontractors want to avoid that because they want to avoid a pump. And if you have to have a pump on site, they don't want to pay the extra grand or $1,500 to have that pump come twice, 2 times to pump that. And so a lot of subcontractors, not a lot, but there's a number of them that will push. I want to get it all poured up at once, and you have risks. It's risky. You really have to know what you're doing. So those are the pros and cons with regard to that. I hope I answered your question, Chance. And difference between footers, stem wall slab versus footers slab without stem. You can't build a slab without any kind of footing. You're going to have a footing no matter which way you look at it. Even in a desert, that footing could be 18 inches wide and it could be 12 inches deep. It could be deeper based upon the geology, and the engineer is going to make that footer fit whatever the geology tells him, what the PSI compaction is going to require for that footing. So you're going to have a footing no matter which way you look at it. It depends on how wide and how deep that footing is going to be. So. Also, who is responsible for placing J-bolts for walls, framer or concrete guy? You're going to have to ask your subcontractors. In California, I know a lot of framers will actually come and place the J-bolts on the footing or approximately where they're going to go. So when they pour, they will actually put them right where they place them. But in my neck of the woods, the concrete person is going to be responsible for that. Now, I've seen some headaches with regard to that because the concrete guy is not really a framer. They're just going off their best guess. And the problem is when a concrete person places the J-bolts, they can place those J-bolts typically a little too close to where studs are going to be, and that doesn't work too well. Or they put them in a corner, and if it's in a California corner, oh, that gets to be a nightmare. And I've seen them actually put J-bolts right there in the threshold where a door is going to go, and they're just off a little bit, and I've got a J-bolt right in the door and have to cut it off. So you may want to call your framer and say, hey, we're going to pour. Do you mind if you come and put a piece of tape on the footing everywhere a J-bolt's going to go? Well, my concrete guy will place them, but if you put a piece of orange tape everywhere you would like to have a J-bolt, that way we know we don't mess anything up. We're not going to mess up your framing, and it's going to be exactly where you want them. In the middle of the wall, the 2x6, 16 on center, and that J-bolt is perfectly there, and it's not too close to a stud. So you can ask your framer if they can do that. And I think they'd be happy to come and do that. If you can make two subcontractors talk like that, all the power to you, and make that work. But check around, ask each one of them who typically is responsible. If your concrete guy says he's responsible, ask your framer to come and tape off the form. All right. And I think he'd be happy to do that for you. I'm getting some here. Brandon asked, Brockway, BB, that's a great, I'm a KK. I love it when people have the same letter for their first and last name. Question, any advice on prepping for pin piles? Pin piles. Do you mean, I think you mean micro piles. I think that's what you mean is a micro piles. I think you asked me if is it going down a micro pile, meaning a pillar, concrete pillar going down into the ground. Let me know if that's the case, and I can answer that question for you. If that's what you mean by pin piles. If not, I don't know what you mean by pin piles. So it could be micro piles. Qualify that question for me. That would help me out. Alex asks, hey Keith, let's talk architects. How do you know who to go with? What do you look for or ask? I've been talking to 4 different companies recently and can't decide who to go with. I've been seeing prices. That's a really, really good question. I'm not a fan of architects if they really do not have 3-dimensional perspective. And I've seen architects and I see a lot of plans and I see a lot of clients go with architects, and architects will charge a lot of money, a lot more money than a good draftsperson. My architect is not an architect, but he's better than any architect I've seen, and he's just a really solid draftsperson. Been drafting custom homes for 20 years, but he was a framer, and he got into an accident. Sweetest, neatest man ever, and he's a paraplegic now. So now he's a draftsman. The best combination ever is a former contractor, framer who knows a lot of framing and becomes a draftsperson. And you don't have that in an architect. In fact, I've seen the best so-called architects, and because they don't have that structural understanding, because the architect is actually going to design the foundation plan, believe it or not, the architect will actually design the foundation plan, and then the structural engineer will take off all the data from the draftsperson and build their structural engineered plans off of that. And so a good draftsman is thinking structurally and is planning for that in advance. That's, to me, is the best. If you have a draftsperson with any kind of building experience, that's going to be to me, in my mind, a far better sales pitch, a better value than an architect without any building experience at all. It's kind of like I'm an engineer or I'm an electrical engineer and they've never worked in the field on electricity, never ever pulled wire through wall. They're just called themselves an electrical engineer, or they've never actually worked with electrical machinery. You want to find someone who has real practical experience in the field, and they're not just in an office somewhere designing something without knowing that. For example, a terrible architect doesn't know anything about MEP, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. They just design willy-nilly, and they don't know how electrical is going to run through there, how HVAC is going to run through there, and how plumbing is going to run through there. They just let those subcontractors design it ad hoc on site, and then they say, why did this guy design it this way? Why couldn't he have done it this way? Or she designed it that way. So a really good designer, architect, draftsman is thinking dimensionally about all these different downstream subcontractors and what they're going to have to deal with. I'm going to go into a rant, but you see what I'm talking about. So get somebody who's got some real good background in the field, and you're going to be heads and shoulders above the rest of them. So let's see here. Oh, Alex, with regard to draftspeople, 85 cents a square foot to $2 a square foot. Right now, I'm paying between $1.25 and $1.50 a square foot. $2 a square foot is pretty high, but it's not bad. I've seen it much higher than that. 85 cents, I wouldn't go that. That's pretty cheap. And when somebody undercuts what the real value of good quality workmanship is, then it's something you don't need to go there for. But around $1.50 is a pretty good price right now. Tony asks, hello, Keith, for clients who want to future-proof their homes, do you recommend fiber, Cat 5, or Cat 6? Let me get back to that. My dog's barking. He's let my dog out real quick. Let's go. That's a low voltage issue. I would just go. It's not that much to go with the Cat 6. Go with the higher grade Cat on that one, and you're talking a nominal cost and upgrade that. What I recommend as far as future proofing your home, you want to look out for electromagnetic pulses, and you have to watch out for CMEs, coronal mass ejections from the sun. Back in 1959, we had something called the Carrington event. It fried our electrical cables across the country. I don't know if I've mentioned this before. And our telegraph wires burnt, our telegraph offices burnt. The power of that CME was so powerful it fried our electrical circuit. Our electrical system in this country, especially in the United States, is not hardened against that. And if you've got an electrical pulse coming to your transformer, And then coming to your 200 amp panel, which is typically on a home, it will fry the system in your home. Now, there's a gentleman out there who talks about um, how to proof your home. You want to focus on proofing your home at the panel so that it doesn't come inside the home and fry your stuff. I've actually had a video he did, and there's a bunch of mechanics you can put inside that 200 amp panel to solve for that. But that's where you want to solve for that problem too. Future proof your home against any kind of electrical surge that can come into the home. And with regard to low voltage, just go with a higher grade on that. It's not that much. Low voltage wire is not costly, not compared to full on copper wire for your home. So hope that answers your question there. I'm getting behind. I'm sorry. Val Smith asks, I was watching some of your old videos and on the course a lot this week. You mentioned power under slab and HVAC under slab. Help me understand. I haven't heard of that. I have heard plumbing under slab. I did a home and I did some videos on this about 2, maybe 3 years ago, where we actually put the HVAC under the slab. And there's reasons why that was forced air under the slab. Well, we had vaulted ceilings in that house. And that's where all the beauty of the home was, in the vaulted ceilings. And I didn't want to drop any of those ceilings to get return air. So we put everything underground. And if you look at my old videos, it was probably 2, 3 years ago, where we actually did videos of that whole process of putting it underground. I almost did it on another home up north, but the ground was so rocky. It had boulders, massive 4 or 5 foot boulders. And I was going to weaken my foundation too much to make that happen. So we put it all in the rafters, and it was going to work okay. So it depends on the architecture of the home. And can you fit all of your forced air through the frame structure without dropping ceilings? And if you're okay with that, then you're okay with that. And then, of course, that's for HVAC. And then, of course, all your sewer, it's going to come underneath the slab anyway. So when it comes to HVAC, it's the fattest subcontractor, not typically the fattest person. Typically, that's your plumber, but the fattest coming through the house. And you could have an 18 or 24-inch return air, like that fat, trying to work its way through the frame structure. And if you're going for conditioned space, which means the heating unit and everything are inside the envelope of the home. And if you're going for that, it makes it really, really hard to do that HVAC, because you're now putting pressure on the framing structure. I did a post on that about a week ago. I might just do a video on a home where we did 2 HVAC units entirely within the frame structure of the home. It was not easy. It put a lot of pressure on my HVAC contractor, who's used to just running everything through the attic and dropping it down through the ceiling and being nice and be easy that way. But when it comes to conditioned space and putting the HVAC inside the frame structure of the home, that's even more pressure on the whole system. So, and you have to do some forward thinking and design thinking, advanced thinking to plan for that. So that's a long way to answer that question. Sorry about that. Next question here. Proofing already scheduled subs. Putting off. Oh, skip my question above regarding putting off already scheduled subs. Let me see. Where was that? I was available in half inch. Yeah, that's two. Oh, but the county said they'll let me go off grid so long as I have a second power source, which they said a generator would qualify. There you go. That answers that question. So if you have a generator on site, and they're going to have to inspect that generator and make sure it's working before they actually sign you off on that one here. Currently. You're going to have to get a temp power pole or have a generator on site for the construction crew to build. And you're going to have at least 2 20-amp circuits on that. Otherwise, they're going to blow the generator. So just make sure you have enough sufficient power to run 2 compressors at the same time. That's typically the max that you would ever need for that site. So, and if your subcontractors don't have that, then you're going to have to supply that. All right. If your framer doesn't have that, and a lot, you're going to have to supply that during the whole course of construction if you don't have temp power there. All right. So you're going to have to think about that. and you can get a generator for $600-700. Have you had to assist someone in Canada navigating the challenges around requiring a builder's license even when they are just building their own home? I think in Canada you can be an owner builder. Uh, it depends on the financing. If the bank requires it, you're stuck. You're going to have to get a GC or find a GC who will be as a consultant for you. Now, I do that in my state, and I've done it in Arizona. I have cross pollination, or what they call reciprocity, with the state of Arizona. I'm dealing with a client now who had a builder, and the builder dug a hole and poured footings and charged him $75,000 for that. I did a horrific video on that. I'm now going to be the GC on the job, but they're going to actually manage the job. But they have to have a GC because they have a bank loan. So that's your navigation as to financing that tends to put a thumb down and saying, we want a GC on there. I hope to change that over the years to get a better system for owner builders. And if the banks could get into the system and see all the checklists, the draw sheets, subcontractor agreements, everything, and they can see that it's a system they can follow, and then the owner builder can slide in and be better informed about managing their own build without a general contractor. We need to wake the lenders up to that. So that's what my job is. See, hi again, drywall is available in 1/2 and 5-inch. Which do you recommend for a whole house application? Whole house is typically 1/2 inch. The garage is going to be 5/8. Garage is going to be thicker, and it's a fire shield, and that's where you need it by code, is a thicker drywall in the garage. The rest of the house is just 1/2 inch. So I wouldn't go to the expense. You're not going to get any additional R value from that, hardly any R value from that. And it's harder to install too. And so it's heavier. I don't know if you put drywall up, 5/8 drywall, that's almost a little thicker than a 1/2 inch. It's really, really thick stuff. So just do 1/2 inch in the house, 5/8 in the garage, or anywhere there's a firewall, you'll need 5/8. If you notice twin homes where there's a shared wall, that's a firewall. And they'll actually put a firewall and they'll do thicker drywall right in between those two homes where they have a shared wall. So Val asks, I was watching some of your old videos and I said, I can answer that question. Robert, skip my question above regarding putting off already scheduled subs. Did I miss that question up there? I can't find it here. Let me see. I just wanted to. Oh, hello, Jose. That's a nice question. Let's see, prepping. Also, is responsible for facing a J bolts. Okay, probably missed that. So I guess you're asking is how do you deal with already scheduled subs? Call them off and put them off if you need to. I'm going to be delayed. There's nothing wrong with that, but don't wait till the last minute. If you have to delay a sub, delay a sub. Happens to me all the time. I called my drywaller, put him off a whole nother week on a job today. So Michael asks, I'd like to get the septic and off-grid solar array installed, roll our RV on property, and then live in it during the build, hence the need for the electricity during the build. That's just something you're going to have to get approval from the permitting office. And a lot of permitting offices will allow that. Some of them will not. And one of the reasons why is counties will be more amenable to that. Cities will not. Cities will say, we don't allow for that. Some of them will just say, we're not going to allow for that. I've got a build coming up where we're going to build a garage, and there's going to be an RV pad for the home. And the RV is going to hook up to the septic, and then we're going to build the home. And it's going to be a 2-step process. And the permitting office is going to allow for that. But again, you're going to want to ask the building officials if they will allow for that. If the RV pad is a built-in thing with a whole design, and you're going to have a 50 amp circuit right next to the garage to hook up that RV, then they're going to say, yeah, it's part of the whole process. But whether or not they let you live in it during the course of the build, that's really up to the permitting office. So check that out. And also, you might want to find out if you're going to do a garage, with an RV pad. Can I have a separate permit for that and then have a permit for the main home? That way you can get a CO for that, move into it, be ready, and then live in the RV while you're building the home. But the RV section of the garage and all that, that's already CO'd and you're already done for that. So septic's the same way. Just be careful on septics because you're going to have to fence it off because a lot of contractors are going to come and you don't want them driving over that septic and crushing it. That has happened to me twice where contractors were just willy-nilly and drove wherever they wanted to, and they end up crushing my septic because my septic system was a shallow system. It was just a foot underground, and they drove over that and damaged it. So watch out for that. All right. Diabolical Debbie says, hey, everyone, I only deal with haunted homes. That's interesting. I think your dog wants to go outside. Yes, I just let her outside. Let's see here. My wife and I are looking to build. Let's see here. Ooh, I skipped some people. Yeah, wow, I'm getting behind. I'm sorry here. Let's see. I love restoring old Victorian estates from the 1800s. So do I, as long as there's not too much wood on the outside and too much decor. I'm okay with it. David asks, put some conduit from your electrical meter outside to your utility room. So if fiber becomes available, they can pull string from your fiber, drop it into your utility room. Yep, very good. Thinking ahead, very powerful. Having additional conduits for just about all the future needs you need. I was at a home today and they drilled a hole right into the footing of the concrete, into the garage to run the power up for the electrical for the sprinkler system. And like they could have just run a conduit up through the footing, right up into the stem, or up into the wall structure and right up into that. And it would have been nice and clean. And it looks terrible. Very beautiful home. And you go in the garage, you see this ugly white conduit along the wall there. And they just weren't thinking in advance. And so, and I kind of blame concrete people for that. They could think in advance. They could call the contractor, hey, I'm about ready to pour. Can I make my best guess on putting some conduit in for you? If not, please get your conduit here, place it where it needs to place, and I'll set it when we pour the concrete. So just communication. So question. How many total inspections happen on a typical project? Can you list those out? Yeah, that's in my program. Go to howtobuildyourownhome.com. And I think it's a download form, and it actually shows a lot of those inspections up through 7-way, up through mechanical, plumbing, footing, foundation. There's too many to list. But one person asks, that's the same person as Sloan asks, what are the 3 hardest inspections to pass? CO, certificate of occupancy, the last inspection you have, because they're going to test electrical, a lot of things, compression of the home, blower door tests. That's the first one. Probably your 7-way or your framing and your shear wall mechanical. That's probably the second one. That's probably the hardest one. Then the second one will be your certificate of occupancy. And then the first one will be your footing, your foundation inspection. Probably in that order, probably those 3. Michael asks, we have a flag lot that slopes per code. We need it to be paved with concrete due to the grade, 600 feet from the street. How can we protect the concrete during the build since we likely need to pave first? Does it have to be concrete or can it be asphalt? If it can be asphalt, what I typically do, especially when there's going to be a lot of traffic on it, I pour 1 inch of asphalt and I have the contractors use that. And then at the very last, we pour the 2nd inch of asphalt after it's all said and done. That way you've got a paved road that can be kind of damaged a little bit. Make sure you've got a good road base underneath there that's well compacted. Pour the 1 inch of asphalt and have the 2nd inch come after that. And if you can do it that in a 2-step, and if you can do an asphalt, you're not going to get frustrated. But with concrete, I would not, if you can avoid pouring that right away or let it cure for 30 days and then have your subcontractors come. But you don't want to have cement come. They're gonna drive on that cement truck, and that sucker is gonna put a lot of compression on that, and that way you may end up pouring it 4 to 5 inches thick with rebar and then protecting it as best you can. But then that's a huge cost, and do you want to have that expense? So I try to find out if you can do it in asphalt. If you can, it's going to save you quite a bit. David asks also, if you're going to pull Cat 6, have 2 wires pulled to every wall plate location. 2 is usually enough. If they hit one of them during some phase of construction, you still have 1. Or you have that Cat 5 in blue Smurf. And if it's in blue Smurf, you can pull it through really nicely. So Sloan asks a quick question. What do you think of 4 mini split heads versus conventional central air heat air with ducts? I love mini splits because I like to control each room as best I can. This here house is on a mini split. I don't know if you can see it up there on the wall, but I have cassette systems upstairs in this house, and they're in the ceiling, really nice and clean. And my ducts are like, it's called ductless for a reason, because it's just a supply line. It's about, like that. It's hardly anything. So I really like them. And I think mini splits have come a long way. I live in the desert. I don't need to have underground heating. I can just have it in the walls, and it keeps it really comfortable. So I would go higher than lower if you have a mini split system on the outside that has the capacity for 4 or even 5. Then you could add them and put them in rooms. In the front of the house here, I put a mini split system, but I had a forced air system already in place. But when I put a mini split in, I had them run line sets for each of the rooms, and I had them just dangling in the ceiling. So when I finally got rid of the forced air, which was going through a hot attic, very inefficient, terrible, I could just add one for each room as I had the funding. And that's why I like mini splits, is because you can add them on when you have funding and you can cash flow it over time. Need I say more? No, I think I've added enough there. I'm getting behind here. Let's see. My wife and I are looking to build this year into next year. We're in Northeast U.S. What should we do before the winter? Foundation, well, sewer. Foundation, framing, get it dried in before the end of November, and you'll be okay if you can. I don't like to get a foundation and let it sit through winter, depending on where you are in the Northeast. And if you really do get a lot of snow, looks like there's a snow emoji there. Yeah, you don't want, I don't like freezing and water to leak and get underneath the foundation and freeze and lift that foundation and have some serious problems. You want to avoid that as best you can. So if you can start your footings and foundation in September and have all your foundation ready, and then have framing take place in October and maybe a little bit into November, you can get that thing shelled and dried in and protected before winter sets in. If you can do that, all power to you. But if you're going to start in December, I wouldn't do it unless you can move really, really fast. But you want to try to avoid the heavy snows getting inside that home and doing some damage. Let's see. Question here. Got 10 more minutes. You talked about insulation, a slab. How would you do this with a walkout basement? Are you insulating the footers and outside the basement walls too, so there is continuous insulation? No. You've got your outside earth up against that foundation, and that's your insulation factor. It's the foundation that is being exposed to the outside air. Well, I would just fur out walls on the inside and insulate those walls on the inside, because with a basement, you have to fur out your walls anyway. And so I would just put my insulation on the inside for those. But just that's the way I would solve it for your basements. For the footers, you don't need the insulation on the footers if you have a basement. That's so far deep down underneath all the dirt that you wouldn't need that. Let's see. Building. Let's see. Did I miss somebody here? Let's see. Let's see. I'm running behind here. If I miss some people, I'm sorry here. We may have to eventually go to super chat when we. I can answer the super chat ones really quick. What's the average build time you are experiencing if someone is getting guidance from your course, excluding unforeseen delays? 8 months. I've seen some owner builders do it in 6. My fastest build was 3.5. But my average build now, because I do custom homes, is between 7 and 9. On very high end, very large homes, it can be as upwards of 10 months, 11 months. But I never go more than 12 months for me on even the most custom large homes. But I've seen owner builders go 12, 14 months. But the average is about 8 to 9. Tony asks, if I'm missing somebody, I'm sorry. I'm scrolling here. Keith, you mentioned that you prefer to get the build right in immediately with a roof. However, because I'm having stucco installed, my builder reports that the roof is last. Is this concerning? If the roof is last, if the roof has an end wall where stucco is meeting the roof, yes, that can be an issue. If it's drywall, if it's asphalt shingle, you can put the shingle on there and just tell them to put some cardboard up there when they put the stucco on there and protect the roof. But if it's not if it's not asphalt shingle, if it's a different kind of shingle, like it's a metal standing seam, yes, they make a mess of that, and it's hard to walk on that. So there's pros and cons. It depends on the roofing material you're using, and if you have an end wall, and that's probably why he's saying that. There's probably a wall, an end wall that's facing the roof. That's probably why he's saying that. If there's no end wall on the roof, no, you don't need to wait for stucco. You can get the roof done. So if you don't know what I mean by an end wall, just Google end wall on roof and you'll see images and you'll see what I'm talking about. Sloan, what is the best way to ask a neighbor for a small right-of-way for power line from pole on their property to my raw piece of land, 30 feet long and power company requires 30 feet wide? I just did that and paid a guy $500 to let me do it. And I had him write up an approval. He signed it. I have that registered with the county recorder. Very, very simple. Ask him, hey, is it okay if I do an underground power? And tell him it's going to be 3 feet down because that power is going to be that deep. So it's not going to affect, not going to be shallow like a gas line could be 18 inches deep. But power is the deepest one. And tell them it's going to be so deep they would never know. And ask them first if they can do it. And if they're hesitant, you say, I can pay you $300 if you just sign me and allow me to do that. But make sure you get some sort of a written approval of it, so that you have a record of that. So I didn't have to pay the guy because the subdivision, when it was signed over by the developers, it allowed for all utilities, power, water, sewer, to be run through properties per cooperation between owners. It was written like that. And there was no fee, meaning I had the right of way to actually run that power as long as I told the client where I was going to run that. And they had to be told in advance. And if they had a better way, then I was supposed to be able to allow for that better way to run through the property. But I had that right built into the development agreement. So research the developer, find out if they have that written inside the development agreement. Do a little research. But then a little bit of money doesn't hurt. So Brian has, if I'm missing some people, I'm really behind and I've got to be gone here in a little bit. Building house in Texas with HVAC in the attic, but not liking the idea of spray foaming and not being able to find a roof leak later. What is a good alternative to provide a conditioned HVAC space? I do not like spray foam. Just something inside me says I don't like it. Now there's some synthetic. They're all synthetic, but there's one that's coming out, I think, that's more natural. That doesn't off any gases at all. I'm actually going to be building a cabin, and I'm working with some developers now. I'm building a cabin that I wrap that whole sucker in rigid 2-inch, 3-inch rock wool insulation, literally on the outside of the frame structure. And then we're going to put the sheeting on the outside of the frame structure. And that includes the roof. So I'm literally putting in a complete blanket on the home on the outside of the frame structure. So Now I have conditioned space. The whole attic is going to be conditioned space. So look into possibly wrapping that whole home. Now there's a product that I had. I wish I had it here. It's 1/2 inch sheeting, and it's got 1 inch to 2 to 3 to 4 inches of rigid foam glued to it. So when the framers sheet the home, they put the insulation side on the inside facing the frame structure, and then that sheeting is on the outside. Now you've got a complete conditioned space, and it's rigid foam, very clean looking. It's pretty awesome. And so you don't have to spray foam that. And then if you have a leak, you can spot it and you can see it. So research insulated sheeting, or they call it, it's not SIPs, structurally insulated panels. It's not that. It's just insulated sheeting, fiberboard, or some other product that actually has the insulation affixed to the sheeting. There's some products out there. Talk to your insulation supply houses locally, and you'll see. I have some videos on that. Just search my videos and you'll see it. Sorry if I'm really behind here. I got a super chat. Says, I'll celebrate the first super chat from Sloan. Thanks, Sloan. I appreciate that very, very, very much. Let's see here. Missing some. Hype Stonks. Hey, Hypes. Welcome back. Hi, Keith. Is it possible to install a 10-foot tall sliding door in a 10-foot wall? Or does there need to be a space between the top of the sliding glass frame and top of the wall? It's CMU block wall. Yes, you're going to need a header, especially if it's a CMU wall and you've got trusses landing on that. You're going to need either a bond beam, typically of a bond beam if it's a CMU wall. But if you're going to want a 10-foot wide sucker in there, you're going to have to lift the trusses and create a shed roof over it just to get a bond beam to support those trusses. It depends on the weight that is going to be above that 10-foot wall. And so I just did a video on it. Came out, I think, Tuesday. Look what I did in that video. I put an 18-inch double LVL over a 16-foot span, and just to accommodate the weight. The weight was spread out and pushed to either side of that wall. So, yeah, you need a header. You need a header for support. GA Patriot, great advice on the driveway. In commercial jobs, I often do asphalt binder early for contractor parking and then do the spot patching and topping asphalt at the end of the job. Do that in very, very cold climates. You have to do it that way. Otherwise, they will destroy that asphalt. And here's an opportunity for that destruction to occur on the first layer, and then you put a second layer after that. Sloan asked, for septic system, do you like new methods, materials, infiltrator, plastic tiles, or do you like the traditional pipes and gravel? Any specific systems you really like? 5 to 6 beds, 2 to 3 baths house. It depends on the geologist that designs that, or the health department that designs your septic system. And it's all going to be based upon the perk test of the soil and how fast water will percolate through that soil. But I like the gravel systems. I like it to just percolate through there and have a lot of open air gaps in there so that it can feed through there, especially if you have really terrible soil that's clay soil that doesn't percolate very well. You're going to want gravel in there. Typically, that's what's going to happen. If you were to buy an only piece of equipment for a cell field on raw land, what would you get? Skid steer, mini, dozer, backhoe with loader. I would do a backhoe with loader. That's what I would do if you're not doing a basement. If you're doing a basement, that's a different story. Then I'm talking track hoe. It depends. Like if you have a lot and you've got a trench 600 feet for power and gas lines or whatever, you're going to need some sort of a backhoe, a track hoe with a track hoe like that. But if you're going to have to move a lot of dirt, you're going to want a front end loader. And that's why the combination of a backhoe with a front end loader, and you can get a lot of those with the John Deere, but they're not very powerful. They move dirt, they can do trenching, but they can only go down about 6 feet, and they can move dirt, but they can't move it very well. So that's why a skid steer is great for moving a lot of dirt real quick, but a skid steer doesn't have a backhoe. That's where a track hoe comes in. It's the best backhoe because it can go down 8, sometimes 12 feet. It depends on how deep you need to go. I could talk for a lot on that, but it depends on, do you need to do a lot of trenching or moving a lot of dirt? If it's a dirt, then it's skid steer. If it's a lot of trenching, then it's a backhoe with a front end loader or a track hoe. So Let's see, zip, Sloan S, traditional fireplace versus cast iron insert. Insert, but I would prefer kind of a Franklin stove that is outside of the typical fireplace. Then the radiant heat from that Franklin stove is warming the house. That's the best idea for very, very, very cold climates. They have these inserts that are wood burning that go right into the fireplace, but they're very inefficient because all the heat is tucked into the wall and it's going up out through the flue and it's not coming into the home. I'd rather have a Franklin stove where I've got a potbelly stove, something of that sort, that's out into the room, and I'm going to radiate heat into the room. So that's my best take on that. But a lot of places, even in California, they're going to make those potbelly stoves illegal. So if you can get your hands on them, grab them while you can, and they're going to make wood-burning fireplaces supposedly more and more difficult to get access to. So the sooner you can get access to them, the better. Say one last question here, and I've got to go here. Closing on Land Tuesday. We'll have my final drawings in 2 weeks. I'm a commercial superintendent, but I've never built a wood frame building, only CMU and steel. Wish me luck on the new house. If you've built CMU, check into OmniBlock, because if you've got that skill set, you might want to check into it, because it's just like building a CMU building. It's almost the exact same. You just have to put insulation inserts in it. Just check it for the fun of it, because if you've got that experience, oh my goodness, that's pretty powerful. So check into that. A metal roof versus shingle, worth spending big money on metal up front, or do shingle and do metal, worth metal later? They in Europe, in a lot of places, they put asphalt shingles on as a temporary measure, and then they put either a slate or a rock or a metal roof after that. So they dry in their homes with cheap asphalt shingles, although we use that for permanent roofing here. So it's up to you. You just don't want to do 3-tab. You want to do architectural shingles, because 3-tab flaps on the wind and it's really cheap. You want to go with an architectural shingle if you want to, and then put something else later. And the neat thing is with roofing is that you can only put up to 3 layers of asphalt. Once you get to that 3rd layer, you cannot put another layer on. You have to, by code, strip it off and put on a whole new roofing product. So if you put on the 1st layer and you know what you want to put on, a standing seam or an aluminum shingle or whatever metal roof, you can put it on right on top of that and not have a problem. So that way you can get into the roof affordably and do the other roof later on. So that's something to think about. Building in California, great. Michael, last question. Any experience with board and batten stucco on ICF? That's a good question. Board and batten with board and batten stucco on ICF. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Are you going with the batten board look, but it's with stucco? If that's the case, what you're talking about is mini bump outs. So you do your smooth, if I'm talking right, if you do your smooth stucco and then you do some small bump outs, then yeah, that's a possibility. But I just don't know if the stucco guys can go really small on the batten part, because you got the board and then you got a batten part. Ask them how small can they go with that, because they've got to do a wire mesh over that and typically foam underneath that to get that look. And if they can get that small, then by all means, see if they can. All right. Thank you, Mr. Kell. It's very helpful. Batten is foam. Yep, that's batten. Ask them how narrow they can get that. And if they can get real narrow, that could look really cool. And then ask them if they can do the stucco a different color. And what they may end up doing is they'll do the batten one color. They'll do that real quick. And then they'll come back and then they'll do the board part with another color. That would look really, really cool. Last question. Sloan asks, ever use oak as siding? Yes, I did it on a very custom home and it split everywhere. Oak comes to you pretty wet. It's very hard to dry oak because it's a hardwood, which means that moisture gets buried into the hard cells of that hardwood. A regular Douglas fir or even pine will dry out faster, but that oak, you may end up coming back to that site and you'll see splits in the oak. I'd rather do cedar on the side That's a more porous open wood than oak. So be very careful on oak. So anyway, last question. That's it for the day. I hope I answered a lot of questions for you guys. I'll be back next week, every Thursday, 5 live chat. Please like, subscribe, check the channel. Again, if you're new to this channel and you're just an owner builder, check out the site at howtobuildyourownhome.com and go to the First Steps course. It's a really powerful course. I was an educator for 20 years. I took all that I took as an educator and put it into my experience as a builder for 25 plus years. And so it's very helpful. And there's a simple module in there that helps you understand the cost per square foot. I want to start to talk more and more about finances, what's coming in the market. I didn't have a chance to talk about that today. Next live chat, I really want to start it off with talking about what's happening in the markets, what to look forward to, what to plan for, what to watch out for, stuff like that. So you need to really know what's going on with interest rates. If interest rates start to hike, and by Joe, there's word that interest rates are going to hike some more. Back in the 1970s, they went as high as 18%. We're not even halfway there yet. And that's what they did to slow down inflation. But it doesn't work, backfires. So watch out for interest rates. It's a big, big, big issue. And I'll start to talk more and more about that and what's really things to watch out for. So anyway, yes, thanks everybody. Michael, everyone, thanks. You guys take care. And see you guys next week. You guys have a great weekend. Bye.